What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell.
Hello, friendly neighborhood nerds. This is Judah Rad, and I'm here with Robo and Ree. And today, are very fortunate. We have a very, very special guest. He's written for a variety of publishers, from Marvel to Boom to Image. Winner of the GLAAD Award for Outstanding Comic Book and the Kerrang Award for Best Comic Book. Now it's 2020. You're still writing the best stuff out there with Die, Wicked and Divine, Once and Future, and more. We have Kieron Gillen, everyone. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. You're very kind.
And we had that same thing we always have where we had issues with time zones this morning. How weird are time zones?
8 hours is a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. So, Kieron, I was saying to the boys before we hopped on, we were talking about this yesterday. I tend to lean towards snarky UK writers. So I love like Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, and Watchmen has obviously come back into the spotlight recently with the TV series. What do you think about Watchmen? I know it's this like pivotal comic that everyone has to read, but what are your thoughts on it as a series?
I mean, like, I tell you, my thoughts are pretty much endless. It's like, if you had genuinely, it's one of the books that's absolutely part of my origin story. Like, in Britain, I read comics as a kid, stopped reading comics as a teen, just because they weren't available in my hometown. You just couldn't get them. And then I got back to them. I was at university. I was going to America to work for a year as part of my degree.
Wow.
In a lab, I was dissecting human brains. Honestly, This is all true. I know.
Oh, nice.
Complete side interview with Kieron's.
What was that
job.
like?
Wow.
I've heard those are the best brains. So.
Yeah, so, on one side, it's really interesting because like it's just like in terms of the mortality of it, as in I was carrying brains across campus for somebody who had died in an operation earlier that day, and they had just like a random operation, just a blood clot, and then they're being carried around by some long-haired students that like there's a lot of stuff, especially since with schizophrenia research is obviously also very hard, as in terms of the life stories of schizophrenics are very, very, very difficult. So that year was really interesting, but also did teach me I didn't want to do science. I just was not interested in the work of science because I am lazy and distractible. But during that year, that's when the year I kind of got my first real flirting with comics as an adult. I was getting my visa to go over. So I had to basically go to the Oxford Street office of the embassy, in the American embassy in London, and I had to basically get my visa that day because it was all kind of done in a rush. Turned up there, and it was open till noon. So I was there at 9, had 3 hours to kill. So I just went to Oxford Street, probably, was it Virgin or Forbidden Planet? Probably Virgin, I think it was. Wandering around, looking for records because I'm a music guy. And I saw a copy of Watchmen for sale there. And I was like, now, at being a music guy in the British music press, I knew that I should have read Watchmen. They covered comics, they covered all the all the 80s scenes. So I knew it's something I should be into or should investigate. So I bought it and I went and read it from cover to cover in the McDonald's at Oxford Street.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And the me that came out there was like, oh right, this is something different. Went to America, as I said, my first week we had no television in the room. I had no access to travel. I was basically trapped in a room for a week. Because no car or anything, and I brought a load of existentialist philosophy and a copy of Watchmen, and I was clearly too depressed to read the philosophy, and I basically read Watchmen from cover to cover like I don't know how many times, and that was kind of and that for me is, since it was really this is what comics can do, in terms of, like, I cannot overstate the influence of Watchmen on me as a creator, partially because it's the thing that makes me here, but also how the fact I reread it so many times so quickly made me really know its structure. Like I knew, I know it quite intensely and ever more since. I mean, I did a comic called Peter Cannon last year, Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, which is kind of my it's a Watchmen sequel in all but name. And basically, it's a deconstructionary comic about Watchmen and what it does and its influence in the medium and the 9-panel grid. And it's one of the books that it's kind of under the radar a little, but it's really to be honest, it reviewed amazingly, so people did like it who read it. But that's kind of my love letter to Watchmen, but also critique of where it took us and everything. I mean, it's actually, if you Google, I did a speech about Watchmen. If you Google Kieron Gillen Watchmen, there's an hour-long presentation of me walking you through Watchmen and talking about panel effects and like, okay, look at this panel, look how this has been created. So like your viewers can easily find what I think
Yes.
of Watchmen at length.
Amazing.
I wish we had you. Wish we had you on the show when we were doing our Watchmen episode. We we did a whole series on the Watchmen, and then we also did a series on the sort of unfortunate before Watchmen series. Kind of breaking that down.
Yeah.
And
I said I have never read it because I'm very much I'm the Alan Moore purist here, as in I believe it's like Watchmen's for me. It's like Brothers Karamazov. It's that kind of like it's a piece of literature, and I don't.
Yeah.
For me, it is. In fact, for me, the fact is an enclosed work is part of the point of Watchmen for me.
That's
But like,
right.
so I have no opinion on Before Watchmen except for the simple reason of I've never read it.
Does that mean you haven't seen the HBO series?
No, I have had a phrase. I hear it's very good, and I'm
it's very good.
and I've heard. I'm very glad of the actual stuff it's covering. Yeah, I think I think Tulsa's something I knew about before, but the
Yes.
fact people discovering about Tulsa through it is very powerful.
Mhm.
However, on the Alan Moore purist and the questions
Right.
of the industry, I can't watch this because I know Alan as well, so I couldn't.
Mm.
Like, it's worth stressing. I haven't talked about TV show at all, really, because I don't want to put a bummer on anyone's fun, really, because
Sure.
or even like because clearly they're having powerful responses to it. But at the same time, it's not something I'm presently watched. So
Understood.
That makes
never
sense. That's a great way to put it too. Like, yeah, a lot of people don't know how to say what you just said without crapping on. Like, yeah, I'm like, you watch that? No, I don't do that. No, but you didn't come off that way. That's perfect.
I hope so. I mean, I tell you, as I'm older, I hope I'm kinder and more understanding. I can imagine me being like 25. I mean, I used to be a journalist who had opinions, but professionally had opinions, angry opinions.
Mhm.
And now I'm a bit like softer edged on it, as in I try to find nuance and try to find ways to connect people, I guess, because I'm a big softie.
Nice.
I'll get there one day.
The world needs big softies, yeah.
Cool.
That's awesome.
All right.
Kieran, we can keep going and chatting to you if you have time, but we understand if you've got stuff on.
I've probably got another like 5 or 10 minutes tops if you want to chat a little. But if you got any,
Okay.
I mean, like,
So-
I'm doing any. We basically got pizza arriving at 8.
Ah,
There you go.
yes.
Oh,
So,
nice.
like-
Best reason.
Yeah.
Your music taste. I'm wondering how that's changed and evolved over the years, because we get an insight into your Britpop taste in the Phonogram series. Is that still where your true music love lies? Do you still give playlists to your artists when you give scripts for anything else?
It's funny. It's like it's always the music. It's the kind of, especially with Phonogram was always it's that just weird obsession on book of mine, and like it was always very like by the end of the 3rd Phonogram, I had a playlist, but I didn't give it out to anyone else. It was just so abstruse. But generally speaking, my work is divided between books with playlists and books without playlists. And the books without playlists are a little bit I don't actually diminutize them. They're less personal, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean they're less full of my nonsense. So like Once in the Future doesn't have a playlist. Die has a
Yep.
playlist.
Mm.
Wicked Divine had a 500 song playlist.
Oh,
You
amazing.
know, Darth Vader had a playlist. Darth Vader had a playlist that solely consisted of the Imperial March from Star Wars.
Right.
Like
Oh,
lots of
yes.
times. So, there's a lot about, but even like ones which don't have playlists, I'm often trying to play appropriate music. So there's a bit like that. In the case of Wick Div, it was like that's probably the most extreme example because I said it's 500 songs basically, and I ended up just having it on shuffle, and it was always like a tarot deck, as in I'd put songs into it because they were important to the story or connected to feelings or thoughts or characters, and by listening with the completely random orders, rearrange the elements of the story to be by each other.
Yep.
Which so
That
an
reminds
enormous
me
tarot
of
deck.
that David Bowie, which is on your shirt, that David Bowie writing process where he like takes it and chops it up and mixes it around. That's really cool. I hadn't even thought about that. That's awesome.
Absolutely, the Barosian kind of like cut up method. Like,
Yeah,
just like
nice.
for me as a writer, it's like, I mean, so I recommend you kind of build your tool set, and it's okay. What's a useful tool? And often, like, one of the first things I do on almost any project is decide what font I'm going to use for it. And normally I don't. Just, I'm lying. I've changed that recently, but traditionally every single project had a font. And like the Wick Div font is different from the Phonogram font and all that kind of thing. I just
Interesting.
now I'm actually writing on Scrivener, which changes things again.
Awesome. Love that.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Wicked and Divine. Probably one of my favorite reads. I think I just love that whole like God thing. So for that one, you said you did have. Did you say you did have a soundtrack for it, or you didn't?
Wicked
Yeah,
Divine, yes,
500.
500. It was kind of like Wicked was designed to be like the the final statement of that kind of period of my life.
Yeah.
Ree was talking about, has my taste in music changed?
Yeah.
And in some ways, Wick Div was like putting an end of that part of my life, as in, however you can quote being a young person, quote unquote, that was definitely the end of it. And I was like well past it. I was much closer to, the older characters and the younger characters.
Right.
So Wick Div the playlist was very much like a lot of things, but also all the bangers from a certain period which had a certain theme. Like there were mainly songs about death and sex. That was kind of what the Wick Div's themes were. That's not quite true, but there were certainly some of them. So yeah, and especially with Wick Div, there's also like it's like Phonogram we love, but it's like playing a gig it's a punk band playing a gig in a toilet and there's piss on the floor. Sorry,
Right.
it's a seedy hole. Whilst Wick Div was me and Jamie trying to play Glastonbury, big stage, enormous lights. So like the songs were kind of trying to evoke that most of the time. There's some Boy and Eno and whatever cracked in the side because I can't help myself.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. So Wicked and Divine, I just had one question about it. So I know there's 9 volumes out, but the question I have for you is in volume 1. There seems to be, so when I start reading it, it seems like even though the panels are right there in front of me, it seems like it's still like, is this real? And I'm reading it like, is this happening in her head? Because even Lucy at the beginning is like, well, I went through your wallet. That's how I know your name. And they give these things. And I'm like, as I'm reading it, and even though I get all the way to the end of volume 1, and I've seen what I've seen, there's like this sense of like, is this actually real? So my question is that on purpose or am I just slow?
Well, good question. Honestly, I mean, there's kind of like I always say, Wick Div has 3 major themes, which are kind of like, what is art for? Why be alive anyway? And there's a third theme which I don't mention what it's about, as in you've got to work that one out for yourself. And they kind of you realize you can probably guess it by 6 trades in, but it's really about stories and lies, as in lies we tell ourselves. Right. And Wick Div is quite aggressively a story. It breaks the fourth wall in quite a few places, and and all the way through, its characters tell stories which may or may not be true. It's often a book about how people choose to lie to each other and how they choose to lie to themselves, and what the lies all that. So what you might be picking up is the slightly heightened sense, because it's all the way through. Laura is talking to us, and in the same way, I'm talking to you now. And by the end of Wick Div, explicitly we're highlighting, a narrator is never like unbiased. A narrator is always coming from a perspective, and that can be good or bad or true or not, or any combination of it, but always be aware that the lens is changing what you're seeing. So I think that might be what you're picking up on. But no, as far as the story's concerned, it's all true, except the stuff that's a lie, but that's also not cheating. Like, the book 100% tricks the reader a lot, but that's kind of what it's also about, as in, look, we did this, and you thought we'd done that, but no, because you just presumed we did that. And this is kind of meant to be that kind of stuff. I mean, a lot of it is just me trying to work out lies I believe myself. It's, I said, like, it's kind of me saying goodbye to being a young person. In the real way, okay, the idea of these pop stars as gods, those kind of people, that stuff I used to believe in. This is me saying goodbye to that and noticing it's kind of nonsense. Right. It's nonsense that meant the world to me, but it's also nonsense. And these 2 things are stuff I wrestle with a lot.
That makes sense. Okay.
That sounds exactly like the conversations I have with my parents. It's all true except for the bits that aren't. I love that. That's so funny.
So the line in Once and Future where one of the monsters just appeared, and he says, "You said all that fan superstition was nonsense." Yeah,
it is.
Look, it's a look at it. It's a weird monster full of dogs in its belly. It sounds like nonsense to me. True things are nonsense all the time, and that kind of like that's 100%. Sorry.
Especially in 2020. Yeah, 100%. You might not be able to answer this question. It's okay if you can't. I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there any news on the TV adaptation of The Wicked and the Divine?
Alas, you're right. As in, basically with TV stuff, it's always it's either something is happening and they can't talk about it, or nothing's happening and they won't talk about it because it's embarrassing. So
okay, one of those two.
Yeah, it's
you figure it out.
Yeah, it's like, but honestly, I find all TV stuff is interesting. I'm always interested in anybody taking me to dinner. So like free food is always good, but it's interesting stuff is always happening.
Well, let me ask one clarifying question to that. Then don't ask about. We're not asking about the reality of it, but as the creator, fast forward 2 years into the future, what kind of show are you seeing? Is this a realistic like Game of Thrones kind of deal, or a CW kind of YA thing?
I think I would talk more broadly about the nature of adaptation, because it's that kind of like if something was happening, we'd be able to talk about it. If you know what I mean. But adaptation for me is always what you're trying to take from a book and put it into the other medium. Because you can't. For me, if an adaptation is too faithful, it kind of becomes pointless. Because especially Wick Live or Die or a lot of my books, they're so about being comics. And if you try to do that on the screen, you're not. As in it's just not. So you've got to try to make something that feels like the book, but in a moving medium, as in something it has that soul. Soul's not a word I like to use, but that kind of that essence. In the same way, like me and Jamie being inspired by pop music, you can't make pop music in comics because we don't have sound, we don't have control of time.
Right.
But we are completely. We look. How can we make something that sounds like the Phil Spector wall of sound? How can we do something that sounds like Daft Punk? One More Time. How can we do TV on the Radio, Wolf Like Me? And we're looking at that. Okay, this isn't like it, but it feels. We're trying to evoke a similar feeling, and that's how I look at adaptation. So, like, I would imagine a Wick Div TV show should, if you did it, it'd be very much. It's that mixture of bleak and pop. That's what Wick Div's about. Those two things are both true. It's like Die would be very, very adult, and that it's all about these adult, real emotions in a fantasy setting. What's the future? This is pulp adventure. They could change all the details of that. If you change a lot of details because that's how adaptation works. But if you cap that essence, be a faithful adaptation.
Capture the feeling. Yeah, makes sense.
I'm like speaking abstractly about adaptation. Occasionally, someone just buys something, does something completely different with it, and if it's a good show, whatever,
Right.
I'm not over precious about stuff.
You're not jealously defending or protecting it. I understand. So, and I could be way off base here, but reading this series, I can tell that you, I think that you love Neil Gaiman.
So, joking aside, I like Neil less than you would think, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because I think he's an amazing writer. He's genuinely he's like an incredible powerhouse, and you cannot take away from the power of his work. But at the same time, he's never really been an influence, and that's impossible to say. It's like my immediate response to reading The Sandman, when obviously back in the I said my origin, I was like a 1 or 2 trade a year guy. I'd read some of The Sandman before, that was just random trades people had lent me, and my response to The Sandman was always, yes, that's how you should do it.
Yeah.
And that means I just think we're kind of creatively come from a similar place quite often. And I think I got most of the stuff which is a Gaiman influence from Terry Pratchett. Play, and of course Terry, the one Gaiman I had read early enough to be an influence was the Good Omens, the co-written ones. So that might be where it comes from. But he's not somebody on my list of major influences in comics, despite the fact I 100% play games with Neil Gaiman stuff because it's fun. The whole meta text and that. I'll tell you what, Jamie McKelvey is a huge Sandman fan. Since Sandman is the comic that got him into reading comics. His girlfriend lent him it, and then he went every week to buy the new trade, and then he ran out of trades, and the amazing shop, Page 45 in Bristol, started said, oh, if you like that, you should probably buy this. Because if not, he would have just walked out of that shop forever. And as it is, it's kind of it shows how important a really good shop is, who sees what people are buying, sees who's coming to the medium. And you might, in that case, it was Skeleton Key by I forgot his name. Oh god, Only amazing artist for Only or Come Back at Some Point. Skeleton Key was amazing, early noughties book. But as I said, I'm not surprised you asked that. I'm not surprised you said that question, because it's absolutely, it's what you would presume, but less than you would think. Still a lot. Cool. Still a lot of stress.
Cool. So in the Wicked and Divine, you got 4 one-shot specials. You got a Christmas issue, comedy issue. All right. So you're gonna do one more hypothetically. Let's just say you are. What era would you make it in?
I'll tell you, there's a pot. We did that with this issue, which is all the way through time. That kind of when we did one panel of every Pantheon. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of them which I've kind of always buried a story in that kind of there's one I would love to do about some of the missing Pantheons. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the quote unquote missing Pantheons. By implication, they are Pantheons which aren't in historical record. In other words, they're in places where we may not know about them. So some of the South American Pantheons I would have been interested in doing. Yes. I'd be very interested in doing I think idea for an Arthurian pantheon. That's very once and future. But but things, if you can actually map the Arthurian stuff to Wick Div really easily, because it's the Round Table,
That's right.
And there's quite a lot, even the Mordred, and there's just a lot going on we could have fun with.
At the end of issue 7.
Yeah, there's a crossover.
Which we'll talk about in a second.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
But, like, there's the one in Gangrel Island, which is Wrangel Island, which is the island off northeast of Siberia, and that's the last place that there was ever woolly mammoths. And you may notice that's around 2000 BC, I think, on the timeline. And the thing about the woolly mammoths there is they were actually miniature woolly mammoths by that point. So, like, this is one. Exactly, this is one of these. There's another story earlier about someone wanting to travel across the entire Bronze Age world to see the last woolly mammoth, and then obviously traveling from Egypt to there. So you get a complete Bronze Age look, and of course, by the time he gets there, there'll be the moment of, oh right, and the moment will be, there's nothing new in the world, all greatness has left the world. And of course, the story has a level, yes, it's sad, but also there's an irony there, because of course, there's much more to see in the world. So there's kind of like everything has been done. Possessions is something I tend to kick against, as in, it's just not true. There's always, the future is very big and you never really know what's in it. On the other hand, woolly mammoths. So, anyway.
Cool. So, in retrospect, the care and love that you put into Thor, Loki, and Angela sort of foreshadowed your work with Wicked Divine, Once and Future, and Die. Especially regarding the otherworld portions of Journey into Mystery, and then how you kind of revisit that with Once and Future. When did you first become interested in mythology?
That's interesting. I mean, I think you're the first person to explicitly say my riffing on Once in the Otherworld stuff foreshadows Once and Future, and you're completely correct. I've very much been aware. Is that kind of I was doing in the same way like Journey into Mystery was like it's kind of like it's a sort of dry run for both, like Wick Div. Young Avengers was obviously proto Wick Div. In some way, Die is like both proto. Journey into Mystery is both proto Once and Future and also proto Die in terms of like some of the storytelling methods I use. Sorry, that's a bit too academic. I've lost the question. It was when it first into mythology. Right. It just kind of creeps up on you, I think. You know what I mean? Like, if you're sort of moving in, I'm trying to think actually what was the first thing I became aware of. Because like Tolkien's one of those very, very early influences for me. And Tolkien, of course, is a way of trying to make a modern mythology. Right. And like coming from like games, and I think the first Marvel comic I ever bought was a Thor comic. I can't be sure about that. It's one of those sort of timeline things you just can't be sure about. So like the idea of just like it was in the Britain, you don't actually have American comics easily in newsstands back then. What you had was reprints of American books but they turned into weeklies. So you have basically third of the issue is from one comic, third from another comic, and a third from a third. Oh, wow. And they're from completely different periods. So you had 1960s Thor next to 1970s Machine Man next to 1980s Secret War. I mean, that's not the exact mix, but that's kind of what you were reading. So you had no idea how any of it tied together. But you got the kind of shape, you know what I mean? Like you get the shape of it. So like,
use your imagination.
Exactly. That was one of those great things. You had no clue what earth any of this stuff meant. But the first one I was like, as a kid, it was like Loki had just created the Wrecker, So like that must be like one of those kind of early primal things where I remember Loki. But it just creeps in my teenagers' years, like the crossover between reading fantasy books and comics and gaming as well. There's a lot of gaming stuff that just has mythology as an element, and you just pick up bits and pieces, and it gets you interested, I guess. That's a very broad answer, as in, it's one of those kind of genuinely shrug holes. I'm not sure, and it scares me actually.
Oh, so yeah. Judah asked me the other day what was the first trade I bought, and I was like, I'm too old, and my brain's too old.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, Judah, go ahead.
So Al Ewing took over the character of Loki, sort of, from you with his Agent of Asgard series, and there's a quote there, but I feel like you two had to have probably talked extensively about the character. He said, magic is just kind of a lie that you tell the universe, and I thought that was very interesting. And looking at your work, one common theme you use between Die, Once and Future is that there's a strength to legend, and that tales actually impact reality, and they become real. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I mean, like, yes. I was about to say, Al did an amazing job. It's weird because I always wrote those two, those Kid Loki books. I think essentially, first part Journey Mystery, second part Young Avengers, and he essentially wrote the third part. It works very much as a trilogy for the character, and he manages to find a way to untie the Gordian knot. You know what I mean? There was like what he did was really interesting, and turning the God of Lies into the God of Stories. That's very clever.
Yes.
Very clever. You mentioned Gaiman, and if you ask me what the major difference from Neil's approach and my approach is to stories, because he's also a Power of Stories guy. I would generally paraphrase, and this is unfair to Neil because it's a simple paraphrasing. His work's much more complicated. Gaiman states that stories are incredibly powerful. Isn't that amazing? What's my take is very much like stories are incredibly powerful. Be petrified of stories.
Okay.
And like that's as I mentioned earlier, like Wictive is a device to talk about the lies we tell ourselves, and lies are kind of what I would call. I mean, people often say that stories are a lie to tell the truth, and I'm not, which I get, but I think there's a China Neville quote: "Is be aware of those kind of like stories which glorify storytellers, because who profits? Storytellers." You know what I mean? Yeah. Like if you turn, you know what I mean? And I'm very much more. I have a much more cynical approach to a lot of this, and I don't mean as in be aware, because if someone can control your brain and make you think something slightly differently, or warp you one way or the other, that's something you have to be careful around. And that's kind of like, but it also makes you powerful, and that's one of these things. Like in Wictive, these are like people who are possessed by gods. These very powerful stories. Once in the future, people are taking on roles, and by taking on the role of these knights, they kind of gain something that iconic resonance. And that's Loki. Some of the major beats of Loki is a storyteller. In fact, he one of the things I'm most proud of in Journey and Mystery is it's a 30-issue run of a Marvel comic, and he never uses the weapon once. He never gets to fight once.
You're right. I didn't notice that, but that's correct.
But I didn't think what most be pleased about it as well as I didn't plan that. It's just that why would he ever do it? It's like, I'm never thinking of a situation where Loki's going to hit someone. He's just going to outthink them or outlie them.
Weaponized lying.
Yeah.
There's a line I dropped. Sorry. There's a line I dropped into an Ares comic I did, which is like, it's a minor work. It's a really fun for issue mini. But Ares describes magic as magic is naught but symbolism weaponized. And the idea that, the point of magic being, which is, of course, a war god describing it. That's obviously how a war god would think, it was my thinking. But the idea of magic being something that literally doesn't make sense, but does make, as in logically it makes no sense, but you go, oh no, obviously that makes sense. So it's that people talk about sympathetic magic, and sympathetic magic is normally doing a thing which is like the thing you want to happen. So, I don't know, like me throwing water in the sky, it would be a water spell, because it's like, I want it to rain because I've just made it rain. That's really basic.
That would be nonsense, but it connects, and then it makes sense all at once, right?
Exactly, and that tendency in our brain to do that is something I'm fascinated in, but also worried about, because it's that kind of like, you apply that to politics, you apply that to gender relations, you apply that to so many things, and it's like, be really careful about the lies you choose to believe, especially the ones you want to believe. That's why I think that's the most. Because the stuff which is easy to reject is easy to reject. You know what I mean? The ones where the stories that sneak you in and make you something you're not, or make you do something, those kind of lies. That's what I'm really proud. That's what a lot of my stories are trying to inoculate ourselves against, I guess. Anyway, that's why.
It seems like you do that, like Judah said, you do it in a lot of your stories, but you do that especially in Once and Future, where and as I'm reading this, I look at these characters and what the grandmother, her name escapes me right now, but what the grandmother, who's super awesome, is telling people is, this is this author, or you need to be this Galahad. So for me, as I'm reading the story, I want it to be very direct, like, oh, this is Galahad. This is Galahad returning. This is him. But then she uses language like that Galahad, like this version, and like you said, it's like what they believe, what they choose to believe, affects the being that's in front of you. Now it's awesome. It's awesome.
Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just add actually, like Once and Future. Actually, major spoilers for Wick Div, but like Wick Div, it kind of builds towards you realizing that being quite true of what Wick Div's universe is like. And with Once and Future, I was like, no, we just start from the off, and like, it's not the twist. It's explicitly this is what we're doing.
This is the story, yeah.
And Arthur's fascinating because how much Arthur's story has changed across the 1500 years. Like what Arthur meant in, Arthur, as you said, he was a Welsh freedom fighting figure originally, and then he became this picked up by the French, used over here, and then he was, and what these myths and stories mean in our culture at different times. And of course, this applies to all culture. This is like what Batman meant in the 60s to the people enjoying the TV show is very different from what Frank Miller saw in the 80s, and they speak to the time they're in as well, I think. And that's not a bug. That's actually one of the fascinating things.
Okay,
interesting.
A little less academic or existential. About the actual story itself, there was a scene in there that really upset me, and it reminded me of those memes that show like a movie, and if a character had just did this one thing, it would go straight to credits, and the movie would last about 2.5 minutes, right? Will I ever see Duncan pay for knocking his grandmother's sniper shot? Because when I saw that, I was like, why would you do that? Why?
I was about to say, where are you up to? Have you read issue 7 of Once and Future yet?
I've gotten to I've read issue 7. Yeah.
I was about to say, well, that would have said, Galahad had a much worse fate in store for him than just being lucky enough to be shot.
I guess
right.
It's like the thing is, talking ethically for a second. She never knew anything about what that guy was like.
Sure.
And even at worst, Galahad's still a kid that's been lied to him by his mum. He's somebody who's been actively turned into what he is.
Right.
In a really bad. So I've got some degree of, obviously, I view him as a villain. I have some degree of sympathy for him, but at the same time, nothing good comes from Galahad. Galahad's got really messed up, and Galahad's situation continues to be messed up as we go forward.
He's definitely much less handsome, so that's for sure.
I love the tension. And so, Duncan is. The thing is, Duncan has to do that because if Duncan didn't do that, he wouldn't be Percival. Because if he had let her take a shot.
Yeah. That's right.
This is one of these bits where, like, Bridget's going to be swearing at him, but Bridget also knows. Well, if he didn't do that, it wouldn't work. So
it's almost like a little bit of predestination there. So my last question on Once and Future. So typically when we do these kind of things, I try to ask the creator, the writer, something like, "Hey, can you give us something unique about this book that's going to keep people reading, right?" And then maybe we get some like, "You heard it here first" kind of things. And but wow, that last page of issue 7. If you haven't read it, guys, watching this, just skip forward like 30 seconds. Spoiler. Beowulf raising out.
Yes.
Holy
that
shit.
That page is awesome.
So awesome. So my question is, I have a specific question and a general question. Will we see Morgan Le Fay, and will she then be a good guy, given how everyone who's supposed to be good is bad? And if you don't want to answer that, if that's too much of a spoiler, is there anything you'd like to give us about the future of Once and Future?
I think, as you said, the issue 7 is the end of issue 7 is the moment you go, wait, this is much bigger than I realised.
Yes.
I mean, I think, obviously part of the joy of Once and Future, you go through and you say, oh my god, they're doing the Sword in the Stone. Oh my god, they're doing this. That's the fun moment. But then the reveal of like the end of issue 7 is like, oh right, it's bigger. It's not just that. By implication, that means if we can do Beowulf, who else can we do?
That's right. That's it. This is everybody. Okay, good.
Yeah. I mean, the only limit we've said is the myths of the British, or the myths and stories of the British Isles. Okay. That's the kind of the setup. So I was actually doing some long-term planning of stuff, which I want to do that or that. And even it goes from like really small stuff like little bits of fairy lore to really big heavy stuff I don't even want to name. But like put it like this: if there's a name you've thought about in terms of British pop culture, and British folk culture, I've probably got it on a list somewhere.
Got it.
But I should think of that. Morgan Le Fay. The thing is, all the stories are bad so far. So I would say it would be a leap to assume that any story is good.
Got it. If
Like,
you're in the story, it's bad.
Yeah, I would actually also, I would have certainly assumed that she's against Arthur though. So like, it's occasionally
but that doesn't make her a good guy, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, that's great.
Interesting. So I'm going to change this over to Di. It's funny, when you were saying that stuff about manipulation's not inherently evil, right? But it's something that all storytellers do. That's what Jonathan Mayberry was saying to us in our last interview. So it is something you have to be conscious of. And I'm a marketer. I know that you used to be a journalist, or maybe you still do so now and then, but like that manipulation is something you have to sort of come to terms with in those kind of careers, right? Where you're like, is this good manipulation or bad manipulation? Anyway, so Di, that series went off, right? You had last year it got an encore 5th printing due to overwhelming interest. Issue 1, which is amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And there's definitely manipulation in that, and a lot of like tabletop game references, which is really fun. But it made me think about, what type of comics do you most like to collect? Do you like digital, paperback, hardcover? Is there any Marvel characters that you just have to have everything for? What's your library like?
Wow. I tend to follow creators over the characters. Like, I must admit, since lockdown, my comic reading has been really bad. It's been actively bad, which is like, because my concentration isn't really there. I'm reading, and I basically just feel like I'm staying on top of stuff. I tend to buy. Until very recently, I always bought single issues because I'll tell you why, to support my friends. As in, there's a degree of like, I'm buying it to support my friends in the comic shop. At the moment, due to my comic shop sort of changing around, I haven't got room in the house anymore. I used to actually give out stuff. That was the thing. I bought stuff to support it and then pretty much give away. And of course, I know quite a lot of people in comics now. And that's a lot of books.
Yeah.
But I've mostly moved mainly to digital now for like single issues. Not always, I'll still pick up some stuff. And that, of course, that happened just around lockdown. But at the same time, I buy trades as well quite regularly. Like, there's some stuff I tend to treat digital as almost disposable. But if you actually want it for the shelf, you buy it in that. And if you really want it for the shelf, you buy it in a fancy format.
Yeah.
Like there's that kind of, I do like that kind of model. Like, you'll see, like behind me, there's like, you can see stuff I've got in different formats.
Yeah.
And
I was trying to have a squeeze before. See what happens.
Like there's I've got like Casanova in all 4 formats. I forget if Casanova's been 4 or 5 formats. But I've got them all. Also, all the single issue versions as well. You know what I mean? And that's, of course, because I'm a huge fan of Matt's work, but I'm also a very close friend of Matt. Yeah, it's always like the thing I love about comics, especially like when I say at the moment, I mean since I got into it, circa 2000, is that blossoming of formats. You know, the idea that you can take this in different sorts of ways. Yeah, like also like, how to phrase this? Me and Jamie are people who wouldn't necessarily have bought single issues. Like, we were people who came in via trades, and therefore it makes us really want to make the single issues good, because it's always kind of like, I often do like extra material in the back and stuff, and like, how do you make the single issue an object? And it's like, and some of that is just, how can we justify it and try to make it something we would buy? So I quite like single as a pop object. I'm trying to think about if I do a next book, I'm trying to rethink about how a single could look. Like, not look in a. I mean, Hickman did the amazing Black Murder.
Black
Monday, yes.
Yes, which is an amazing book. But one of the many
so amazing
bits of work, the real single issues have to be the same size. Like, we'll make some issues small, and some issues have more and less of stuff. And I always describe Hickman's very interested in the cage, by which I mean the limits, the things we don't think about. As in, because if you don't, society is those unspoken limits, and Hickman is very much like, okay, why does the issue have to be like that? And I'm not, you see that with what he did with the X-Men run. You see that through his work. His work is like both about how the societal cages us, but also about, it's also formalistically like that, which is something I also think about in some ways. So like, okay, even with 32 pages, how could I do 32 pages slightly differently? Like, I'm thinking about that kind of thing.
Yeah, nice.
Okay. Yeah, but formats are interesting because like form determines. I've got the word. Form determines purpose. So like, the hard limit of, okay, I've got 20 pages of comics. What can I do with it?
Yep.
I've got 10 pages of comics. What can I do with it? And in some ways, much like poetry, okay, not all forms of poetry, but like, you're writing for a space, and therefore you're making choices dictated upon what works well in that space. And if it doesn't work well in that space, you don't make that choice. It's a medium I love. It's just really fascinating for me.
Oh, cool. So
I am probably a nerd.
For my next question, I'm going to have some company here with me. I hope you don't mind. Funny story. I found this in a dumpster.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But,
That's it. There it is.
right. So you contributed some amazing shit to Star Wars lore. Darth Vader, awesome series. But there's one part in particular. There's one panel, and it's when Darth Vader first realizes that he has a son, and then he has flashbacks to all the key moments of the prequel trilogy, and then he's like so overwhelmed with rage and emotion, the glass or the transparent steel starts to shatter on the Star Destroyer. Wow, that's like, it's rare that a moment in a comic can be as significant to the overall plot as the most significant things that happen in any of the movies. What was it like working up to that? And was that a collaboration between editorial, or was that something you just kind of dreamed up? How did that work?
This is, I must admit, actually, it's huge. I genuinely can't believe I got to write that scene. You know, it's like, because I've said this before, so you might know it, but the first movie I remember seeing in a cinema was Empire. So essentially, with those comics, I was writing the introduction to my own entry into pop culture. That's some Grant Morrison time travel stuff right there. You know, that's the thing that blows my mind most about it. Is writing Darth Vader didn't throw me. You would think that something that obviously that was that primal for you would like get in your head and go, "What am I doing?" But no, I felt, to be honest, like I mentioned, I felt a bit like Duncan. As in, like, oh no, maybe I've just been bred. You know, this is my purpose to just write this scene or whatever. Because that was the other thing. Is like I got to write that scene. I mean, Jason did as well. You know, and that was kind of the in terms of how it happened. I must admit, I'm a little foggy about exactly the plotting. Because obviously, Jason also did a version of that scene. I just, because I was doing the Darth Vader book, got more space.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
I got to really extend it and make it like that. That's the one people tend to remember. But like
he was kind of following the Boba Fett thread, and yeah, you were taking it from a more Vader-y perspective naturally.
Yeah, like the story's kind of separated, and you know,
right.
Darth Vader's on the cover. By definition, I've got more space. But that was definitely remember when we were pitching the books, that was definitely the thing we realised. Like a lot of my Star Wars work was, okay, let's look at the period and work out what is lying there. What would I, as a fan and a reader, want to see, and what has not been shown? So it's kind of the for me, it's always like, can I delineate between A New Hope and Empire? What is missing there? And for me, okay, there's a fall and rise of Darth Vader because he lost the Death Star, and at the start of Empire, he's more powerful than ever. And there's also that, as you say, this incredibly powerful moment in the story where Darth Vader realizes the last 20 years of his life have been a lie. You know, that's like,
how do you get through that? Yeah,
it's almost it's essential. I mean, it's crazy. Like, I love it because I'm a huge proponent of the comic book genre. If you were unable to tell, I love that they could. Yes. So, well, excuse me, it's a medium, not genre, but I just love that something so essential is in a comic spin-off. So it's pretty awesome.
Which you don't see very often, by the way.
Right.
You see those mid, like, I won't name any names just in case they're any of your friends, but you see some of those comic book adaptation of movies or things that are supposed to happen between movies, and then you're like, that was a money grab. And I did not feel that with Darth Vader.
Editorial won't let you put like a too significant a moment in the comics.
It is hard in that. It's one of those bits where licensed books are a difficult gig in lots of ways, and we were very lucky. I mean, Lucasfilms, the story group were incredibly generous. As you say, you know, we went in and we pitched big, and we pitched stuff we thought they would say no to. You know, because we wanted to, instead of playing it safe, we'd rather be told no than not have the chance of having something. And the amazing thing about working with them, they also were very proactive in terms of, if they said no, they said, but you could do this. Or like,
nice.
You know, like I had I forgot his name. You can tell this has been a very long day. The who was my villain? The Admiral Tag. Tag's the guy. I said I wanted someone to be the more like graft and reasonable sort of guy. When I say reasonable, I mean driven by reason, not reasonable in a human way. And he said, well, Tag's around, and Tag could still be around. We can bring him back for this. And so I had this one of the characters who in the movie who speaks, and I got to use him just because of their suggestion. It was a really
great.
But sometimes in a license kit, you have much smaller limitations, and you're forced to just doodle in the margins, and that's when it ends up. I don't necessarily blame the writers. I much like it's the nature of the job. I think
that makes sense. That makes sense.
And this is like there was just so much meat there, and they're not going to do a movie of it, So I think it's that kind of like they don't go for that kind of stuff, which is very cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And we get treated to stuff like the introduction of Dr. Aphra, the torture murder droids, and there's a really poignant scene around Darth Vader like killing the Anakin side of himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I was going to ask if that was drawing from personal experience. You kind of answered it earlier because you were talking about the wicked and the divine being this like end to your youth. But is there ever a time in your career that you've had to kill a part of yourself in a similar fashion?
Yeah, actually. To answer the question of your identity and who you choose to. I used to write under various pseudonyms. Like before I was a comic, I used to be a journalist beforehand, as you say. But before that, I was a fanzine writer. So I had like 2 or 3 pseudonyms. Like, because in a fanzine, having a pseudonym is just what you do. And like, I got to the point when I started writing on PC Gamer, which was my first real job. Writing as my real name felt like a pseudonym for quite a few years. Like it just, and I was aware of the quotation marks around Kieron Gillen. I always remember like when I killed off C Monster, who was as in letter C -monster.
Wow.
I was in the middle of and I sort of like was crying on a dance floor in a club called Fusion in Bath. And my friend Ruth realised how much it clearly meant to me, and we were hugging and crying on the dance floor to some ridiculous goth nonsense. Anyway, but yeah, so at the same time, like on some levels, I think you have to be an active awareness of what you're doing and what you want to be and how you want to continue, I guess. And in some way, Wickdiv was me definitely killing a period. Like, I'm surprised I still have the beard. I grew the beard for Wickdiv. That was my Wickdiv look.
I've been growing it for Wickdiv too.
Keep on trucking.
It's not quite as impressive. Thank you.
But actually, obviously killing is. I mean, I'd agree. Actually, who you killing all parts of yourself and trying to change. One of the big questions in my work is how much can we change? How much can bad people change? And why do people do bad things anyway? Because it's like this is the thing that, like, and how do they self-justify and all? And that's a lot of what into Darth Vader. I think that's one reason why I think a lot of my books tend to be about villains or people who are morally grey. Because I'm like, that's what's confused. Because it's like we all know what's good. The question is, why don't we do it? But the actually, that thing though, that's a really good example of the story group, because the story group said maybe you could do a Force vision for that whole scene, and I was like, I would have never pitched that. I would have thought that was too weird. What I mean? That's like it's obviously it's a Dagobah, the cave sequence, so it's got elements there, but like I wouldn't necessarily have gone for a Force vision. And they said you should try that sound, and I was standing on a street corner in London taking the phone, and I was like, really? And I pitched it. I wrote it. And it's one of my. I'm glad you enjoyed the issue. It's one of my favourite bits because it's really primal. You know what I mean? That kind of like taking those big scenes and doing them was like a hell of a thing.
I bet.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah,
So I'd like to talk about X-Men a little bit. That was actually my introduction to you as a writer, was your Uncanny X-Men and your Sword mini, and then the Uncanny X-Men run, and I really, really like that. But this is gonna kind of push forward towards the end of your run. So you didn't write Avengers versus X-Men, but you were writing Uncanny X-Men during this pivotal moment in their lives.
That's an interesting job, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm wondering do you consider it an interruption when a huge event happens with your characters while you're writing them, or is it a collaborative effort? And even though you weren't writing the issues of Avengers versus X-Men, were you kind of directly involved in the plotting of that?
I'll tell you, one of my things about doing work for hire, especially at the big companies is what bugs me is when I don't know what the job is. Like the thing about work for hire is the job can change, or if the job changes in a major way, it's like, Wes, I didn't sign up for this. But quite a lot of times, it's I know this job is going to be hard. So, for example, before doing Uncanny X-Men, I did a run on 4, taking over from JMS, and that job was clearly a nightmare. It's like kind of I had to step onto a book mid-process and get them out of Latveria in 3 issues, get them over to Siege. Actually, let me just describe the problems. They're in Latveria. Loki's just been revealed as being involved in the vivisection of Asgardians, and 4 is not involved in the plot. He's off in Broxton. Now, in 3 issues, I've got to get them back to Broxton, make Loki be trusted again, and also bring 4 back into the plot so he can be involved in his own book. Yeah, no worries. And then I would have another 2 issues to cross over to Siege, as in the big crossover Brian was writing, and that'll be it. So that was like, and to be honest, I probably shouldn't say this. I didn't have access to I had no idea what JMS was going to end his run as either. So I had no idea where I was even starting. Wow. So I sat there and plotted every single way he could take the plot. And then I had a few ideas because I use a character. Anyway, the specifics doesn't matter, but I completely worked out whatever I do and get it back there. And then that run, those 2 issues that during Siege turned into 3 issues, then 4 issues. And then there was 2 other tie-in issues I did. And then I was asked to do another 4 issues afterwards because the next run was taking some time to get ready. And I had no warning of any of that. It was just, can you do another issue? So that was fine because those jobs were specified, but then it was a new problem. And the fact that job is so impossible to do basically Kieron can deal with, I'm somebody who doesn't cause problems, he solves them. It's the Mr. Wolf in Reservoir Dogs, and that kind of like.
It's interesting to think of writing in those terms as almost like an athletic event where you have.
It's funny. It's I often think about writers. People use the word writer to mean everything. But there's dozens of jobs inside being a writer, and it's a bit like you say you're an athlete. It doesn't mean you're good at weightlifting if you're a sprinter. Yeah. And I think writers are a bit more like football players, as in they've all got different things they're good at and bad at, and weaknesses and strengths. And therefore, in that case, it's like they found I was quite good at dealing with stuff, which plus I think comes from the journalism. Because in journalism, I think people tend to think of me as a prima donna. I suspect if you ask any of my old editors, but in terms of actually learning to work in a system, I had more experience with that than a lot of writers, a lot of comic writers, I think. Anyway, so that basically, we need someone to write Uncanny X-Men now during this major crossover that's already been planned.
Fear itself, right?
Yeah, no, it's as in Fear itself, but also AVX because that was also planned.
Okay, right.
So I went on to Uncanny X-Men knowing that actually Fear itself happens, and then Schism happens, and then 10 issues later, Uncanny X-Men.
Generation, and you're linking it all together with Generation Hope as well, which is another amazing series. We're not even going to there. But so in other words, I knew that basically I had 10 issues of Uncanny X-Men, and then Schism, and then 10 issues and AVX, and then. And I knew I would be tying into most of that stuff. So I viewed that as not as a problem. I viewed that as the entire point of my run. So the reason my Uncanny run was I'm to dovetail as gracefully with these major character beats. Because if I ignore them, the book will feel weightless. Because I basically spent my 10 issues after the relaunch of Uncanny X-Men building up the idea I want to see the X-Men and the Avengers fight. My whole thing was basically the X-Men try to do the Avengers job. That's kind of what I do. So in the same way as Schism, I'm all about building the tension, showing Cyclops' increasing steps towards more paramilitary. I mean, he's been heading paramilitary for years, but I was basically taking over Breaking Bad in season 4 with Cyclops. This is the guy. Yes, that is a good.
And it was honestly I was a fan of those books beforehand, so I saw what they were doing, and I think
the handoff between Matt and you is seamless.
I mean, like I say, Matt's a really good friend, and Matt, I think, in terms of people don't often talk about work for hire writing as a team thing. They often talk it's like one person's vision. I think Cyclops is a really interesting case of the X-Office having a very clear journey they're taking Cyclops on, and various writers took that on at different points and executed it amazingly, and which is one reason why I think people do like my run, is that I'm paying off all this stuff. It's easy to, all these dominoes are here, and I'm going to knock them, which is a nice, and that's the upside of a certain kind of work for hire writing. So yeah, it was. No, I had very little input into AVX's larger plot, but I was always looking at like, okay, where are the stories? What isn't in the crossover? And I did that with Journey into Mystery as well. And that kind of, especially with AVX, it's okay. What wouldn't? Okay, not even what would annoy. Okay, partially what else would I like to see, but also what would annoy me as a fan if it wasn't covered, specifically as an X fan.
Yes.
And okay, we've got to do stuff with the lights. We've got to do this, and the emotional stuff, I guess. I mean, I did Consequences afterwards, and since AVX was a crossover I like a lot, but it's really high energy. I got basically to do 5 issues of people having emotions, and everyone really liked that mini. Just as rather, it seemed to do had to be polite. Those minis that come on that the traditional sort of Consequences after a major crossover mini, they don't tend to review very well. Because they feel like inessential. I think Consequences did better than almost any of them, and I think it's because AVX was such a high energy thing. People just wanted to have the characters sit down and scream at each other. Like, what the hell were you thinking, Logan?
It was a powerful. It was like kind of a powerful tie-in for sure.
It was fun, honestly. But like, that's what I really enjoyed writing. I love those characters and getting and in some ways having that structure of. It removed a lot of problems. It's not like I had to sit down and work out what my direction was. It was like, here's a problem, how am I going to solve it? And that's half my. I mean, like when I was doing that work for hire period, I had that kind of dual, like stuff like Uncanny X-Men was showing that I'm not a complete weirdo. I'm somebody who can, I can write state-of-the-art action comics and enjoy, hopefully make people enjoy them. And then there's always also doing a lot like Journey to Mystery, which show no, I am a weirdo, and I'm going to do something a bit weird over here. And that's kind of like what I like about comics is you don't have to just write one thing, and I can kind of have a balanced diet. And even now I kind of have a similar rhythm. I tend to do one book that's a bit pulper and one book that's a bit heavier. And like at the moment it's Die and What's the Future. What's the Future's the pop book. Die is the bleak hellhole. And I couldn't do just one sort of those books because it would break my heart.
One more question, and then I think Robo's got some questions. So Die is amazing, but you're half the reason why it's amazing. The rest is Stephanie Hans, who is unbelievable.
I was like more than half. Seriously, she is a powerhouse.
Did you meet her when you worked with her on Angela? Is that how it got started?
She was the cover artist of Journey into Mystery.
Ah, that's right.
So and she actually did the last issue of Journey into Mystery. And until then, I had no idea that she did internals. It was just like my editor, Lauren, suggested, hey, how about getting Stephanie to do it? And I was like, oh, I didn't know she did it. And that last issue is one of my favourite things I ever did at Marvel, as in it's one people quite regularly talk about as a heartbreaker. And Stephanie nailed it. And of course, ever since that issue, I was like, in fact, I think I'm not sure when we said it, but I might have said it then, as in we should do a book together sometime. And ever since then, it was like a quiet back burner conversation, and eventually it becomes, okay, now we do the book.
She's perfect. She's perfect for Die, and she has this technique or stylistic thing where it's like she'll make it so bleak, but if she wants to accentuate one thing, it glows. It's like glowing neon orange thing, and it directs the eye. Like she has complete control over my eyes. It's amazing.
She's got Stephanie to me is like mood, like Stephanie's mood. Like she's like it's a color choice. It's and she can draw an angry expression like anyone, but that's what she does. It's like Titian, who's a name I can never pronounce. That kind of understanding how color and light works. I mean, you've mentioned she's perfect for the book, and of course I wrote it for her. That kind of like it was like for a few years it was like, okay, is this an idea for Stephanie? Or like in the same way, like What's the Future? It was like Boom wrote to me saying, "Are you interested in collaborating with Dan?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll go and see my ideas. What would I like to see Dan Moore draw? And also, what would Dan like to draw?" So it's a bit like always you're writing. Okay, for me, in an ideal state, you're writing for an artist to try to like showcase what they're good at, because that's what makes you look good as well.
That's right. No, that's absolutely right. That's interesting. Okay, so this next question is, and I hate to fanboy out a little bit, but I'm reading through your stuff, and Mr. Gillen, you hit home run after home run after home run, and I'm just wondering, like, do you have any, like, how do you like maintain humility? Because I'm going to be honest with you, if I saw success like that, I'm pretty sure I'd be an asshole. I'm pretty sure, unless you're an asshole and you would like to let us know that. I don't know.
I think I tell you a lot. The theme of how power corrupts is this, and how people end up justifying doing bad things and all that kind of, at least in some degree, self-inoculate me as well. And also, another of my themes of work is nobody is special. And it's like, despite the fact that, the point of Wictive is these people aren't gods. Just
Right.
thinking you're an artist doesn't make you a god. And that's kind of like explicitly what Wictive is about. Both metaphorically and literally. A lot of it helps the people. You can try to get people to ground you. I mean, I am somebody who's well aware I have flights of fancies, and it helps that you have friends who basically insult you. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
People like my wife's eye roll is about basically what I live for in this way, and I really, there's a lot about like who you choose to surround yourself with,
Right.
and I think the danger is, I mean, I'm not like, compared to like a lot of people, I'm a very successful comic writer. You're being very kind, but there's definitely people of a much higher level. Like look at someone like Gaiman, for example. Like imagine being Neil Gaiman, and you're very aware. But even I'm aware that people speak to me differently. And I walk into a room and there's some situations where my presence has been like a black hole and is now altering people's actions.
Yeah.
And therefore, how much can you imagine? Like also imagine the super famous. How can they even process what is a normal interaction with a human being?
That's right.
And for me, I'm hyper aware of it, and especially writing about it. Hopefully, it helps. And a part because it's like, I know, I'm just the losing contact with that humanity. I think would be utterly harmful to the writing, and also, I mean, there's the Alan Moore quote: "Is the it's much more important to be a better human being than being a good writer." And that's it's just, I mean, it sounds very banal in some ways, but it's also very true.
Sure.
Like, I don't know. So you also have to keep the irony, like not irony, but some defense level, because you can't take it directly. Actually,
Right.
This is a useful idea. I have like a practice phrase when people are very kind to me. I say, people rave about my work. I normally say, "That's really kind. I'm glad you enjoyed it."
Yeah.
And that's my way of like, I'm obviously like that's a hard thing to, I've trained myself to say that because I really want to self-deprecate, or like, "Oh no, you don't."
Yeah.
And that's going to read as an insult to them and their taste.
Sure.
So something I occasionally find, I think that when people say
I
they
didn't
like
think
that,
about that. Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's
You
I
like
did
that?
once.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. I did that to a major American. Was it Jeff Johns? Where Jeff Johns said he liked my forerun, and I did that. Well, someone has to, and I immediately saw that. And it's that kind of like, oh no, this does not work, especially with Americans. In Britain, it's more, but Americans especially. It's the
Right.
and they're right, because self-deprecation is a stupid thing to do. But one of the things I also remember when people come up, like I get people who come up and cry. Like it's happened a lot, but it happens like probably like one time a con, probably maybe two, and it happens enough to have a crying drill, as such as okay, we're going to help this person get through something that's obviously emotionally important for them.
Wow,
And that's
awesome.
that's what you got. They're not actually coming to you. If you use the gods metaphor, you are somebody who just was involved in the creation of something that meant something to them.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really talking about their feelings about a work of art, and you're just like a handy object of them to say it to.
Right.
So like, there's a lot of that thinking about that to the level of the humility there, I guess, and also like, so the better I get at writing, quote unquote, as in the more successful I've been, the more, especially after my dad died, which of course is connected to Wictive, I tend to think about it less of art and more as plumbing. Like my family are all builders. Not all builders, but there's a lot of builders, and I worked on building sites as a kid, not as a teenager, not a kid. That's horrific. But like, there's a lot about the job of writing, which is connecting tubes together. Like this idea is introduced here. It has to go, and if you remove a pipe, poo flies everywhere and sewage is on the floor. But the ability to a writer to connect these ideas up in a way which carries people through is a craft question. And that actually is a way for some of my friends hate me for talking like this now, but like just think about art as just as another another ability you can learn, and it's a hard ability, and obviously it's an ability that means a lot to people, but it is still just a craft, so that helps as well.
All right, awesome. So we're going to start this new thing, and I hope this doesn't ruin the tone or the mood of this interview. But we decided that we're going to start ending on a very serious question, and it's okay if you don't want to answer it. But the question is, would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
I've answered this before in the pub. And I think my answer is 100 duck-sized horses.
That's pretty much winning the poll right now, so that's good.
I think I think I could fight a horse-sized duck. It's enormous. It's got a big mouth.
Yeah,
it's bigger than me. And if it wants to fight
I'm thinking a bigger ostrich. Yeah, no.
But think about the glory. You know what I mean?
No. That's why I became a writer. It's like inside work, not attacked by killer ducks. Like these are things that attack. When I was a journalist, I used to finish almost every interview with a question, and my question was, if dragons were real, would you eat one?
Ooh.
No, the answer is no. Because if dragons were real, would you eat one?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
I would not, only depends on what dragon you're talking about, because every dragon I've read about are sentient, and no, I'm not eating sentient things like that. Yeah.
True.
There you go. Okay. There you
go.
But if they're just animals, then okay, yeah. I mean, they ate a cow and not a dragon.
My favorite is like dragons being like a kebab, as in they kind of cook, they just have their cooked meat on the inside, which I just anyway.
So we've asked all of our prepared questions. Here's a question. Is there anything we should be asking, or is there any cool
anything you want to
things
pitch?
that you might want to pitch or tell us or blow everyone's minds with?
Sure. We haven't mentioned my current book, have we? I said I've got a book called Ludocrats coming out at the moment.
I saw that.
Yes. It's probably like Ludocrats is the book I'm doing, co-writing with Jim Rosenthal, drawn by Jeff Stokely, coloured by Tamara Bonvillain, where the ever-trusty Clayton Cowles on lettering. It's how to phrase this. It's basically it's kind of like the Monty Python meets I Hate Fairylands. Is that kind of vibe? That's how people sort of. It's it's weird. It's not lighter. It absolutely is lighter than. It's complicated because it's that. In some ways, it's not lighter in any way, but it's also fundamentally dumb. As in, it's like an epic amount of nonsense piled up together. It's the idea is basically it's a fantasy comic about these aristocrats that are ludicrous, and it's basically a world where being boring is kind of the worst sin, as it's everyone's just trying to basically preserve this level of wonder and weirdness, and we lean into that. So in other words, it's kind of like the Never-Ending Story if you squint, but like the Never-Ending Story had a lot less sex jokes, so it's very broad, silly sex comedy about these ludicrous aristocrats. I don't even describe like some of the stuff. Every issue, pages come back, and I was like, "Did we really get Jeff to draw that?" Funny, it was originally me and Jim thought up the idea in 2003. The second issue script was written in 2007. Then it was like announced in 2015. David Lafuente was the artist for that release, and it just never worked due to schedules. And then Jeff stepped on like years down the line. But the idea was like issue 1 was written in 2014, issue 2 was in 2007, issue 3 was written in 2019. You know what I mean? And now it's finally coming out.
I've heard stories like that a lot.
It's a weird. It's like the thing about Ludocrats. It's very light, and I'm just like, there's books I fell in love with, which have been basically a ray of light in a really grim year. And that's kind of what Ludocrats is for me. In that, here's a lot of nonsense. We can chill out, make each other laugh, and try to. It's funny. It's a very. I would say it's an adult book. I must say it's got mature on the back, and I'm like, it's not mature. It's desperately immature.
It's an adult immature book.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But yeah, we're very fond of it. It's only a 5-issue mini, so it's a short, sharp kind of like punch.
And you said it's out now?
This issue 2 came out this week.
Okay, great.
I saw some covers. Like the art reminds me. I don't know if you guys get this in the UK or probably not in America, but the Hagar the Viking comic in the newspapers. That art is really
That's an amazing comparison. I mean, the the way I used to describe it in interviews was Asterix and Obelix meets the Meta Barons. But of course, that involves
I love that.
like less. I mean, there's less people, especially in the American market, who know who Asterix and Obelix are, and also not many know the Meta Barons either. So it's kind of like a comparison doesn't mean anything, but it absolutely is. It's that guy. In fact, Joss has got a bit of the British comic Viz now. I think about it, but it's a very colourful and like, you know, it looks a little bit too child friendly. That's why we try to put stuff like syringes on the first issue's cover, because we're trying to. This is not for kids. Like the first page is an enormous, like this 8 foot tall, morbidly obese man covered in blood turning to you to say, "Oh, hello, it's you," and that kind of like, you know, it's like, oh man, there's a lot. I mean, that's how we start.
See, now I need to ask, because you mentioned Monty Python. What's your favorite Monty Python movie?
Oh my god, that's a good question. I mean, to be honest, in a very literal way, the best one is actually Life of Brian. I think actually in terms of, you know, actually it's a better movie. It works as a movie. It's not just a bunch of sketches, and it's, you know, it's probably intellectually the most interesting one. But I tell you what, the one that's the biggest influence, almost certainly the Holy Grail. Because you know, I'm writing.
Of course.
I've been resisting making Monty. You know, can you imagine how hard I've resisted making Monty Python jokes all the way through this comic?
that was my introduction to British people. So
just like that.
I know you're about
the movie.
Go ahead.
Sorry, have you ever seen the movie Excalibur? 1980s Borman movie about Arthur.
I haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen it, it will make no sense. I always presume that being as a kid, it's this incredibly melodramatic, like very serious, operatic take on Arthur. And I always presumed as a kid that the Holy Grail was taking the Mickey out of Excalibur, because it's like, but realizing it came like 10 years afterwards, I couldn't imagine any universe anyone would make Excalibur where already existed the Holy Grail. It's like, imagine if like Aeroplane came out before all disaster movies. You know, it's that kind of thing. Anyway,
interesting.
We are doing a show with safe sex writer Tina Horn tomorrow on sex positivity. You brought up Ludocrats. Or
Ludocrats.
Ludocrats. I wasn't sure if they were gonna have cats or not. Okay, so Ludocrats. And then we, just so you know, we will be actually referencing some of your work in there. With what was it? Wicked and the Wicked and Divine, and then maybe we'll take today and read the 2 issues of Ludocrats too. So just so you know, we will be going over some of your work amongst other things tomorrow with our sex positivity show. So
that's awesome. Say pass hello to Tina. She's great.
Yep,
she is great. We love her.
Kieron Gillen, thank you very much for coming on the show. It is an honor for you to be here, and I know that you have the urge to self-deprecate right now, but it really is. As soon as we click off, we're trying to be professional here, but as soon as we say bye to you, then we're all going to scream around and do this little dance we do. So really, honestly, though, seriously, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, and I'll be doing my screaming and running around too. It's been lovely. It's been lovely to be here.
I got you.
Subscribe, ring the bell, and be free. Follow our links and watch our show because you want to and not because of the threats. Thank you for watching Judah, Robo, and Ree. We talk about comics, movies, and TV. Sometimes we have notable guests, and sometimes it's just us. But we're also cool.